You wake before the sun has even considered climbing over the eastern mountains. The darkness is complete, save for a single oil lamp that flickers in the corner of your chamber. The tatami mats beneath you still hold the warmth of your body, the last comfort you will know today. Outside, the world is silent, except for the occasional call of a night bird preparing to surrender to daylight. This is the hour when most of Japan still dreams, but for you, for the samurai, the day has already begun its relentless march. A servant kneels at the threshold of your sleeping quarters, head bowed so low that their forehead nearly touches the polished wooden floor. They do not speak. They do not need to. This ritual has been performed countless times before you were born, and will continue long after you are gone. The servant's presence is announcement enough. It is time. You rise, feeling the cool morning air against your skin, a sensation that will soon be denied to you. Your joints protest quietly, still stiff from yesterday's exertions, still remembering the weight they carried. Your body knows what is coming. Your muscles tense involuntarily, preparing for the burden they will bear until nightfall, if you are fortunate enough to see another sunset. The first layer is the simplest, a thin cotton undergarment that covers you from neck to ankle. It is pure white, symbolizing the purity of purpose that must accompany a warrior's heart. The fabric feels soft against your skin, a gentle deception. This layer will eventually be soaked with your sweat, perhaps your blood. It will cling to you, become a second skin beneath the weight you are about to assume. The servant helps you tie it closed with practiced movements, their fingers never hesitating. They have done this hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. Next comes the hidejuban, another layer of soft cloth that wraps around your torso. It must be secured precisely, too loose, and it will bunch uncomfortably beneath the armor, too tight, and it will restrict your breathing, a dangerous compromise in battle. The servant adjusts it with small, efficient tugs, reading your body's responses without needing instruction. You stand perfectly still, conserving your energy. You will need every ounce of strength before the day is done. Outside, the first birds begin to call to one another. Dawn approaches, though you cannot see it from within these wooden walls. You can feel it, however, in the gradually changing quality of air that seeps through the paper screens. The world is awakening, but your world is narrowing, being sealed away one layer at a time. The hakama comes next, the traditional divided skirt that falls from your waist to your ankles. Made of heavy cloth, it adds another layer of weight, another barrier between you and the world. The pleats must fall correctly, must be arranged with mathematical precision. Each fold has meaning. Each crease represents an aspect of the warrior's code that you are bound to uphold: loyalty, honor, courage, righteousness, honesty, benevolence, respect. The servant takes their time, ensuring each pleat lies exactly as tradition demands. You stand motionless, breathing slowly, deliberately. Now the preparation intensifies. The servant brings forward the first piece of what will become your outer shell, your public face. The jar, the chest armor, is placed beside you, its lacquered plates gleaming dully in the lamplight. Before it can be secured, you must don the haragake, a protective cloth that covers your stomach. It is tied tightly, a band of pressure around your midsection that will remain there until the day's end. Already your body feels different, constrained, less your own. The chest armor is lifted into place. It is not yet the full weight you will carry, but it is substantial enough that you feel your posture changing, your spine straightening against the pressure. The servant begins the intricate process of securing the doll with silk cords. Each cord must be pulled to precise tension, tight enough to keep the armor firmly in place during the violence of battle, but not so tight that it restricts the expansion of your lungs or the movement of your arms. The knots used are specific, traditional, tested through centuries of warfare. They will not fail. Even if you do, your breathing changes, becomes more measured, more conscious. The pressure around your torso reminds you with each inhalation that you are no longer merely a man. You are becoming an instrument of your Lord's will, a weapon being assembled piece by careful piece. The sword, the shoulder guards, are attached next. They hang from your shoulders like great lacquered leaves, protecting the vulnerable joint where arm meets body. They limit your ability to raise your arms fully, a compromise between protection and mobility that you must learn to navigate. The weight increases. You feel it settling into your bones. The coaty, armored sleeves are slid onto your arms. They are surprisingly heavy for their size, the small metal plates sewn between layers of cloth and leather creating a flexible but formidable barrier. Your arms feel encased, distant, as though they are becoming something separate from your body. The servant secures them with more silk cords, tying them at precise intervals along your arm. Each knot is a small ceremony, each tightening of the cord another step in your transformation. Outside, the light has changed. Dawn has arrived while you stood motionless, submitting to this ancient ritual. You can see it now. Pale light filtering through the paper screens, painting geometric patterns on the wooden floor. The day has begun for Japan, but you are still in the process of becoming. The kusazori, tassets that will protect your thighs, are attached to the bottom edge of your chest armor. They hang like a heavily armored skirt, the metal plates overlapping to create a moving shield that will guard your lower body while still allowing you to walk, to ride. Each plate adds weight, pulls you further down toward the earth. You feel yourself becoming heavier, more substantial, less human. The sunniate, shin guards, are strapped to your lower legs. They cup your calves in curved, lacquered protection, limiting the flexibility of your ankles, changing the way you will walk. You already know that by day's end, the edges will have rubbed your skin raw, no matter how carefully the padding has been arranged. It is an inevitable discomfort, one of many you will endure without comment. Now comes a critical moment in the transformation. The helmet, the kabuto, is brought forward. Before it can be placed on your head, you must first don the eboshi, a cloth cap that will cushion your skull against the metal that will surround it. The servant adjusts it carefully, ensuring it covers your hair completely, that it sits correctly on your head. Then, with solemn ceremony, the kabuto is raised. The helmet is a work of art, as much as an instrument of protection. Lacquered metal plates curved and joined with exquisite precision, adorned with the emblems of your clan, your rank, your identity as a warrior. It is lowered onto your head, and immediately your world changes. Sounds become muffled, distant. Your peripheral vision vanishes, replaced by the narrow frame of the helmet's opening. You can see only what is directly before you, a warrior's focus made physical, enforced by the very armor that protects you. The weight of the helmet presses down, compressing your neck, demanding that you hold your head perfectly upright. To look down requires a movement of your entire upper body. To look to the side means turning completely. Your awareness of the world is constricted, channeled into a narrow corridor of perception that lies directly before you. This is how you will experience battle, a series of framed moments, disconnected from the chaos that surrounds you. The menuroi, the face mask, is the final piece that will complete your transformation, shaped to resemble a fearsome visage with prominent cheekbones, a mustache, sometimes fangs, or a snarling mouth. It is designed not just to protect, but to terrify. It will be your face in battle, the last thing many men will see. The servant raises it to your face, and for a moment you feel a primal urge to pull away, to resist this final surrender of your humanity. But you remain still, accepting the mask as it is tied securely to your helmet. Now your transformation is nearly complete. Your breathing, already constrained by the chest armor, becomes even more restricted. The mask's small openings for your mouth and nostrils limit the flow of air. Each breath must be deeper, more deliberate. Speaking becomes an effort. Your voice, when you use it, will sound different, hollow, detached, emerging from behind the frozen expression of the mask. You have become something other than human, a walking symbol of authority, of threat, of power. The final elements are your weapons, the daisho, the paired swords that are the samurai's soul. The servant presents them to you with reverence. The wakizashi, the shorter companion sword, is tucked into your obi, the sash at your waist. The katana, your primary weapon, is handed to you with both hands, a gesture of respect for the blade and for the man who will wield it. You take it, feeling its weight, its perfect balance, even through the armored gloves that now encase your hands. The sword is slid into place at your waist, secured where you can draw it in a single fluid motion, or at least that is the ideal. The reality is that your movements are now compromised by the weight and restriction of your armor. Drawing the sword requires practice, requires that you work with, not against, the limitations of your protection. It is a technique you have spent years perfecting, and still there are days when the armor seems to resist you, when your body and your equipment act as adversaries rather than allies. You are complete now. From the simple man who awoke in darkness, you have been transformed into a walking fortress, a human encased in lacquered plate and cord, in tradition and expectation. You stand a solitary figure in the growing light, feeling the full weight of what you have become. The servant steps back, their task complete. They bow deeply, then silently withdraw, leaving you alone with your transformation. You take a step forward, hearing the creak of armor, feeling the shift of weight, the subtle restrictions in your knees, your elbows, your shoulders. Your body is no longer free. It is encased, directed, controlled by the armor that protects it. Each movement must be measured, must work with the limitations imposed by your protection. You move toward the door, each step a negotiation between your intention and the armor's resistance. The wooden floor creaks beneath your weight. You slide open the paper screen and step out onto the veranda that encircles the house. The morning air is cool, the light still gentle. Birds sing in the garden, insects buzz among the carefully tended plants. It is a peaceful scene, one that exists in stark contrast to the purpose of your transformation. In the courtyard beyond, other figures stand in similar armor. Some are motionless, some practice controlled movements with their weapons. All are separate, isolated within their own transformed bodies. These are your companions, your fellow warriors, each one having undergone the same ritual, each one now as removed from their humanity as you are from yours. You descend the wooden steps carefully, mindful of the limited vision provided by your helmet, the restricted movement of your ankles in their armored guards. The gravel of the courtyard crunches beneath your feet, the sound seeming to come from a great distance, filtered through the layers of your helmet. The morning sun catches the curved surfaces of your armor, reflects in brief, bright flashes. You feel its warmth only vaguely through the many layers that separate your skin from the world. A servant approaches, leading your horse. The animal is already saddled, equipped for war just as you are. It stands patiently, accustomed to the sight and sound of armored men, trained not to shy away from the strange figures you have all become. Mounting requires a specific technique. You cannot simply swing your leg over the saddle as you might in civilian clothes. The armor restricts such movement. Instead, you must place your foot in the stirrup and pull yourself up with controlled strength, settling into place with a final adjustment of your swords, your armor plates. The saddle feels different beneath you, the added weight and bulk of your armor changing your center of gravity, your balance. The horse shifts, adjusting to your weight. You settle, finding the position that will allow you to ride for hours if necessary. Another skill learned through endless practice, through trial and error, through discomfort endured until it became tolerable, if never quite comfortable. From atop the horse, you survey the courtyard. Other warriors are mounting their own steeds, each one going through the same careful process. Servants move among you, making final adjustments, checking armor cords, ensuring weapons are secured properly. The morning progresses, the light strengthening, casting shorter shadows across the gravel. Soon you will ride out. Soon the purpose of all this preparation will be realized. But for now, in this moment between preparation and action, you are aware of the full impact of your transformation. You have surrendered comfort, surrendered the easy freedom of movement, surrendered even the simple pleasure of feeling the morning breeze against your skin. You have accepted restriction, weight, discomfort, all in service to your role, your duty, your place in the order of things. You are no longer merely yourself. You are a samurai, an extension of your Lord's will, a walking embodiment of power and threat and controlled violence. You are protected from the world, and the world is, in some measure, protected from you. The armor separates you, elevates you, marks you as something other than ordinary. It is both barrier and symbol, both prison and privilege. The sun climbs higher, the day grows warmer. Already, you can feel the heat building beneath your layers, the first beads of sweat forming on your skin. This too is part of the burden you have accepted. This too is what it means to be what you are, what you have become. The sun has fully risen now, climbing steadily into a sky of unblemished blue. Its rays fall upon your armor, heating the lacquered plates that encase your body. Already, you can feel the warmth building, trapped between the layers of cloth and metal and leather that separate you from the world. By midday, this gentle warmth will have transformed into stifling heat, an inescapable furnace that will test the limits of your endurance. But that is hours away still. For now, you endure only the first suggestion of the trial to come. The column forms slowly, each mounted warrior finding his place in the procession. Banners flutter in the morning breeze, announcing clan affiliations, unit designations, the complex hierarchy of power and obligation that defines your world. Servants and foot soldiers move among the horses, carrying supplies, extra weapons, their status marked by the simplicity of their clothing, the freedom of their movement. You watch them from within your armored shell, aware of the gulf that separates your experience from theirs. They may die today, as you may, but they will do so unencumbered, their bodies free, until the final moment. A signal is given. The column begins to move forward, horses stepping carefully, riders sitting straight in their saddles, despite the weight that presses down upon them. The rhythm of hooves on packed earth creates a steady drumbeat, a martial music that accompanies your departure. From houses along the road, people emerge to watch you pass, their faces showing a mixture of awe, fear, respect. Children point, women bow, men stand with lowered eyes. You are a spectacle of power, a physical manifestation of the authority that governs their lives. The weight of your armor makes itself known with every movement of your horse. Each step the animal takes sends a small shock up through your body, causing the plates to shift subtly, the cords to tighten and release in tiny increments. You must constantly adjust your posture, must work continuously to maintain the proper position in the saddle. There is no rest, no moment when you can simply allow your body to be carried without conscious effort. The helmet presses down upon your head, a constant pressure that will eventually transform into pain. The face mask limits your breathing, forces you to inhale more deeply, more deliberately than normal. The chest plate restricts the expansion of your lungs, creates a subtle but persistent resistance to every breath. You have trained for years to adapt to these limitations, but adaptation does not mean elimination. The discomfort remains. You have simply learned to function despite it. Your vision is severely restricted by the helmet's narrow opening. You can see what lies directly in front of you, but to view anything to either side requires turning your entire upper body, a movement made cumbersome by the weight and construction of your armor. Your world has been reduced to a series of framed images, disconnected from any wider context. This tunnel vision creates a strange sense of isolation, as though you are moving through a painting rather than the actual world. Sounds reach you as if from a great distance, muffled by the layers of your helmet. The clop of hooves, the creaking of saddle leather, the occasional cough or command, all are dampened, indistinct. Even your own breathing seems to come from somewhere else, a rhythmic rushing that provides a constant background to your limited auditory landscape. You strain to hear clearly, knowing that in battle, a missed command or unheard warning could mean death. The column leaves the confines of the town, moves out onto a road that winds through fields ready for harvest. Farmers pause in their work to watch you pass, bowing low, their simple garments and bare heads a stark contrast to your elaborate encasement. They straighten only after you have passed, returning to their labor with the knowledge that their lives continue only at the pleasure of those who wear the armor, who wield the swords, who command the fate of the land and its people. The sun climbs higher, the heat increases, sweat begins to flow freely down your back, your chest, your face. The cloth layers absorb some of it, but much remains trapped against your skin, creating a slick interface between your body and your clothing. Where armor presses directly against cloth, the sweat cannot evaporate, cannot provide its cooling function. Instead, it accumulates, eventually soaking through the material, creating patches of cold dampness that will gradually warm to the temperature of your overheated body. Hours pass in this slow procession. The column stops occasionally to rest the horses, to allow for adjustments to equipment, for the passing of brief messages between unit commanders. During these breaks, you remain mounted, unwilling to undergo the complex process of dismounting and remounting in full armor unless absolutely necessary. You sit, feeling the sweat pool in the small of your back, between your shoulder blades, behind your knees. You shift position slightly, seeking some small relief from the constant pressure, the unrelenting weight. There is none to be found. Other warriors sit similarly immobile on their horses, each one isolated within his own cocoon of discomfort, his own private struggle against the armor that protects and imprisons him. Occasionally a servant approaches with water, offering it up in a bamboo ladle. You raise your face mask slightly, just enough to accept the liquid, not enough to expose your features fully, and drink gratefully. The water is warm, but it provides momentary relief to your parched throat. Then the mask is lowered once more, the brief connection with the ordinary world severed. The column moves on. The landscape changes gradually, fields giving way to scattered stands of trees, to steeper terrain that forces the horses to labor more intensely. The rhythm of their movement changes, becomes more uneven, creating new patterns of pressure and weight distribution within your armor. You adjust continuously, your muscles working without conscious direction to maintain your balance, to prevent the shifting plates from pinching or binding. By midday, the heat has become your primary adversary. The sun beats down from directly overhead, heating your armor until it seems to generate its own warmth, radiating inward toward your already overheated body. Sweat pours from you now, soaking your undergarments completely, creating a humid microclimate between your skin and the layers that encase it. Your vision blurs occasionally as sweat runs into your eyes, stinging with salt. You blink it away, unable to reach beneath your mask to wipe it clear. The column pauses again, this time in a small clearing where a stream provides water for the horses. You remain mounted, watching as servants lead the animals to drink, as foot soldiers refill water containers, splash their faces, enjoy the simple luxury of coolness that is denied to you. Your thirst has become a constant companion, your throat perpetually dry, despite the occasional sips of water you are offered. Beneath your armor, your body cries out for relief from the heat, for the freedom to seek shade, to remove the layers that trap the warmth against your skin. These cries go unanswered. A signal is given. The column prepares to move out once more. As your horse turns to rejoin the formation, you feel a sudden shift in your armor, a subtle change in the tension of one of the cords that secure your chest plate. It is a small thing, a minor adjustment in the complex system of connections that hold your protection in place. But you know from experience that even such small discrepancies can grow over time, can lead to gaps in your defense, to increased discomfort, to potentially dangerous structural failures. There is nothing to be done about it now. To call for assistance would delay the column, would draw attention to what might be perceived as weakness or lack of preparation. You adjust your posture slightly, trying to redistribute the weight to compensate for the loosened cord. It helps somewhat, but you know the issue will worsen as the day progresses, will add yet another layer to the accumulating burden of your armor. The afternoon stretches before you, an endless sequence of moments filled with heat, weight, restriction. The landscape continues to change, becoming more rugged, more defensible, the kind of terrain where battles are fought, where the fate of provinces is decided. You scan the horizon as best you can through your helmet's narrow opening, searching for signs of the enemy you have been sent to engage. There is nothing yet, only emptiness, heat, the rhythmic movement of your horse beneath you. Your fellow warriors ride in similar silence, each one conserving his strength, preparing mentally for what may come. There is no casual conversation, no sharing of discomfort or concern. Such expressions would be unseemly, would suggest a weakness unbefitting your status. Instead, you maintain the stoic facade that your literal mask represents, showing nothing, admitting nothing, enduring everything, as though it were no burden at all. The weight of your armor has long since ceased to be merely physical. It has become symbolic, metaphysical, a manifestation of the code that governs your existence. You carry not just lacquered plates and silk cords, but obligation, loyalty, the expectations of your ancestors, the judgment of those who will come after you. These intangible burdens are far heavier than the material components of your protection, far more persistent in their demands on your strength, your endurance, your will. As the afternoon progresses, you become increasingly aware of your body's limitations. Muscles that have been in constant tension for hours begin to tremble slightly. Joints that have been compressed, restricted in their movement, send dull pulses of pain up your limbs. Your neck aches from supporting the weight of your helmet. Your lower back throbs from maintaining the rigid posture required by your chest plate. These discomforts are familiar companions, expected elements of your chosen path. You acknowledge them silently, then push them aside, focusing instead on the landscape ahead, on the mission that justifies your suffering. The column crests a rise, revealing a valley below. Your commander raises a hand, signaling a halt. Through the restricted field of your vision, you can make out movement in the distance. Another column, another formation of armored men on horseback. Friend or foe, you cannot tell from this distance, can discern no identifying banners or emblems. You wait, motionless, as scouts are dispatched, as messages are relayed back and forth between units. The tension of uncertainty adds yet another layer to your burden. Your muscles tighten further, preparing for potential combat. Your breathing becomes more measured, more controlled. Beneath your mask, your expression remains neutral, betraying nothing of the calculations, the assessments, the preparations taking place in your mind. You are a vessel of potential violence, held in check only by discipline and command. Word comes back. The distant column belongs to an allied clan, moving to take up position on your flank for the coming engagement. The tension eases fractionally, but does not disappear. The enemy is still out there, still waiting. The certainty of combat merely postponed, not eliminated. The column moves forward once more, descending into the valley. The terrain becomes more challenging, forcing the horses to pick their way carefully along narrow paths, down steep inclines. The movement causes your armor to shift, unpredictably, the loosened cord allowing greater play between the plates than is ideal. You compensate continuously, adjusting your weight, your balance, working harder with each passing moment to maintain the appearance of effortless control. By late afternoon, exhaustion has become a physical presence, a weight as tangible as your armor itself. Every movement requires conscious effort. Every adjustment demands resources from reserves that have been steadily depleting since dawn. The sun has begun its descent toward the western horizon, but the heat remains intense. The air within your helmet stale, humid with your breath and sweat. Your vision blurs occasionally, a combination of fatigue and the salt that continually runs into your eyes. You blink it away, force yourself to focus on the path ahead, on maintaining your position in the formation. Around you, other warriors show similar signs of fatigue, slight slumping in the saddle quickly corrected, momentary lapses in the precision of their movements, the occasional need to adjust armor that has shifted out of optimal position. None of this is acknowledged, none of it discussed. Each man bears his burden alone, maintains the fiction that the armor is no impediment, that the day's march is no hardship. To admit otherwise would be to admit weakness, would be to suggest that you are somehow unworthy of the privilege, the responsibility of your station. A messenger arrives from the vanguard, delivers a report to your commander. Through the filtered sound that reaches you within your helmet, you catch fragments, enemy forces sighted, preparing defensive positions, estimated numbers. The commander issues orders, voice-pitched, to carry to all units, despite the barriers of helmet and distance. You listen intently, absorbing the information, adjusting your mental preparation for what is to come. The column changes formation, spreading out into a more battle-ready configuration. Units separate, Take up positions that will allow for coordinated movement. Once engagement begins, you find your place automatically, guided by years of training, by the ingrained knowledge of your role in the complex organism that is an army preparing for combat. In the distance, too far to make out clearly through your helmet's restricted opening, lies the enemy force. They too are arranging themselves, preparing their defense against your approach. They too are encased in armor, are sweating, aching, struggling against the same physical limitations that constrain you. This shared suffering creates a strange bond between you, a connection that transcends the enmity that will soon drive you to try to kill one another. The sun sinks lower, casting long shadows across the valley floor. The light changes, becomes warmer, more golden, glinting off the curved surfaces of helmets and shoulder guards, turning the army into a sea of moving light. It is beautiful in its way, this manifestation of organized violence, this carefully choreographed prelude to death. You observe it with detached appreciation, your aesthetic sense somehow separate from the physical discomfort that has become your constant companion. Your unit moves forward, taking up position along a ridge that offers both visibility and protection. You will wait here, holding this ground, until the order comes to advance, to engage. The waiting is its own form of torture. All of the discomfort, the restriction, the heat of your armor, with none of the distraction that action would provide. You sit motionless, conserving strength, watching as the sun sinks toward the horizon, as shadows lengthen across the valley that will soon become a battlefield. Others arrive, take up positions beside you. No words are exchanged, no acknowledgement of shared purpose or shared suffering. Each warrior sits isolated within his armor, within the private universe of his thoughts and preparations. The silence is broken only by the occasional snort or stamp of a horse, the distant call of a bird, unaware of or indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath its flight. As dusk approaches, servants move among the units, distributing food, simple rice balls wrapped in bamboo leaves, dried fish, perhaps a small cup of sake for each warrior. Eating requires another temporary lifting of your face mask, another brief moment of relative freedom, quickly surrendered to the necessities of protection. The food is consumed quickly, methodically, without pleasure or complaint. It is fuel, nothing more, taken to sustain the body that must soon perform its violent function. Darkness gathers in the valley below, pooling first in the deepest recesses, then gradually spreading upward, consuming the landscape in increments. Torches are lit among the enemy positions, pinpoints of light that reveal their presence, without exposing their numbers or disposition. Your own forces remain dark, relying on the natural cover of night to mask your strength, your arrangement. Messages continue to pass between units, carried by runners who move quickly despite the growing darkness, who navigate the complex arrangement of forces with practiced ease. Plans are adjusted, contingencies considered, commands clarified. You absorb each piece of information that reaches you, fitting it into the mental map you have constructed of the coming battle, of your role within it. The capacity for this kind of strategic thinking is part of what separates the samurai from the common soldier, the ability to understand both the immediate tactical situation and its place within the larger context of the conflict. Night falls completely, stars emerge overhead, indifferent witnesses to the human drama poised to play out beneath them. The air cools, providing some small relief from the heat that has plagued you throughout the day. But with this cooling comes a new discomfort. The sweat-soaked clothing beneath your armor now becomes cold, clammy against your skin. The contrast between your overheated body and the cooling metal of your outer protection creates a strange thermal gradient, another sensory confusion to be endured, to be pushed aside in the darkness, surrounded by similarly motionless, similarly encased figures. You wait. The awareness of the coming dawn, the coming battle, hangs over the encampment like a physical presence. Sleep is impossible in full armor, sitting upright on your horse, or even if you were to dismount. At best, you might achieve a state of reduced alertness, a semi-conscious drifting that provides little rest but helps to pass the long hours until morning. Most warriors do not even attempt this, choosing instead to remain fully aware, to use the night hours for mental preparation, for spiritual centering, for silent communion with the ancestors who watch over them. You sit, feeling the weight of your armor, the chill of night air against the exposed portions of your face, the dull ache of muscles held too long in one position. Around you, other warriors do the same, each one a self-contained universe of discomfort, determination, duty. This is the weight of honor made tangible, the physical burden that validates the spiritual commitment, the concrete manifestation of abstract principles that govern your existence. The night deepens, hours pass in stillness, in silence, broken only by necessary communications, by the occasional adjustment of position to relieve the worst of the physical strain. Your mind drifts between alertness and something like meditation, a state where the discomfort of your body recedes without disappearing entirely, where your awareness expands to include both your immediate physical reality and the broader context of your purpose, your place in the order of things. And through it all, the armor remains, confining, protecting, defining. It has long since ceased to be something separate from yourself, has become instead an extension of your identity, a physical boundary between the private self and the public role. Within its confines, you are simultaneously imprisoned and liberated, restricted in movement, but freed from the ordinary limitations of individual existence, bound to a purpose larger than personal comfort or survival. This is the paradox at the heart of the warrior's path, that true freedom comes through absolute commitment, that the heaviest burdens are those most worth bearing, that the self is most fully realized when most completely surrendered to a greater cause. The weight of your armor is the weight of this paradox made manifest, pressing down upon your flesh even as it elevates your spirit. And so you wait, bearing this weight, embodying this paradox, as the night slowly yields to the first suggestion of dawn, the coming light that will illuminate the field of battle, that will reveal the enemy, that will signal the transformation of potential into kinetic violence, of preparation into action. The weight you have carried through the long day and night is about to find its purpose, its justification, its culmination. The armor, your constant adversary throughout this ordeal, will soon become your only ally in the chaos to come. The first faint hint of dawn appears on the eastern horizon, a barely perceptible lightening of the darkness that would be invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. You have been waiting for this moment, marking the slow passage of night with the patience of one who has no alternative. Around you, other warriors stir slightly, minute adjustments to positions held for hours, a collective awareness that the time of waiting is coming to an end. The air grows colder in these final moments, before sunrise, a last embrace of night before the heat of day returns. You feel it against the exposed portions of your face, a crisp chill that briefly penetrates the constant warmth generated by your body within its armored shell. Your breath forms small clouds of vapor as it escapes through the openings in your face mask, visible evidence of life contained within the immobile exterior you present to the world. Messengers move quietly between units, delivering final instructions, confirming positions and responsibilities. Through the filtered sound that reaches your ears, you catch fragments of reports, enemy positions unchanged, estimated numbers consistent with previous intelligence, terrain as expected. Nothing has changed overnight to alter the plans made yesterday. The battle will proceed as anticipated. The pre-dawn gloom pales, gradually transforming the landscape from featureless shadow to textured gray. Forms emerge from the darkness, trees standing sentinel on distant ridges, rock formations, creating natural barriers across the valley floor, the silhouettes of enemy fortifications, hastily erected during the preceding day. Your vision, already restricted by your helmet, is further compromised by this half-light, rendering everything indistinct, potentially deceptive. Your commander signals for attention, delivers final instructions in a voice pitched to carry, without revealing position to distant enemies. The plan is straightforward, a coordinated advance across the valley floor, pressure applied to the enemy's flanks, while the center holds, forcing them either to divide their forces or to yield ground. Your unit will form part of the right flank, driving inward once the initial engagement has begun, seeking to turn the enemy's formation to create vulnerability through disruption of their line. You absorb these instructions without comment, without visible reaction. They confirm what you had already inferred from your position, from the arrangement of forces you observed yesterday. The battle to come will be like many others you have experienced, a test of discipline, of coordination, of the ability to maintain formation and purpose amid the chaos of combat. The light strengthens, detail emerging from shadow. You can now make out individual figures among the enemy forces, armored warriors, not unlike yourself, preparing for the same violent confrontation from the opposite perspective. Through the narrow opening of your helmet, they appear as distant shapes, not fully human, their individuality obscured by distance and by the sameness of their attire, their posture, their purpose. Final preparations begin. Bowstrings, kept dry and protected overnight, are strung tight, quivers are checked, arrows counted and arranged for easy access. Swords are loosened in their scabbards, ensuring they will draw smoothly when needed. Horses are given small amounts of water, their tack adjusted, their readiness assessed by servants who move efficiently between mounted warriors. You go through your own preparations methodically, each movement practiced to the point of automaticity, requiring no conscious thought. The familiar ritual calms your mind, focuses your attention on the immediate, the concrete, distracting you from the abstract awareness of mortality that hovers at the edges of consciousness. You are not preparing to kill or to die. You are simply preparing to perform a function, to fulfill a role, to execute a series of technical movements with precision and efficiency. The sun breaks the horizon, sending long golden rays across the valley, illuminating dust particles suspended in the still morning air, creating a momentary beauty that stands in stark contrast to the destruction soon to unfold. The light catches on metal surfaces throughout both encampments, flashing from helmets, armor plates, blade edges, a constellation of reflected brightness that maps the disposition of forces more clearly than any scout's report. With light comes increased visibility, but also increased vulnerability. You can see more clearly now, through your helmet's opening, can make out details of the terrain you will soon traverse, can identify potential obstacles or advantages. But you are also more visible to the enemy, your position more clearly defined, your movements more easily tracked. The narrow field of vision provided by your helmet becomes an even greater limitation now, forcing you to turn your entire body to scan the battlefield, to maintain awareness of a situation that will soon become fluid, dangerous, unpredictable. A signal passes through the formation. Prepare to advance. You check your weapons one final time, adjust your position in the saddle, ready yourself for movement. Your horse shifts beneath you, sensing the change in your posture, the subtle cues that communicate your intentions. The animal is a veteran of such engagements, trained to maintain composure amid the noise and confusion of battle, to respond to commands delivered through pressure of knees, shift of weight, tension of reins. It is perhaps the most reliable element in the uncertain equation of combat. Another signal, and the formation begins to move forward. Horses step carefully down the slope, picking their way among rocks and uneven ground. The movement causes your armor to shift, plates sliding slightly against one another, the loosened cord from yesterday, creating a small but persistent imbalance in the distribution of weight across your torso. You compensate automatically, adjusting your posture to maintain stability, to present the appearance of unwavering control. The descent into the valley is slow, deliberate, the formation maintaining its integrity despite the challenging terrain. No one speaks. The only sounds are the clink of armor, the creak of leather, the soft thud of hooves on earth, the occasional snort of a horse sensing the tension of its rider. It is a strange quiet, a suspended moment between preparation and action, between potential and kinetic energy. The silence itself seems to have weight, substance, a presence that fills the space between the advancing warriors. Across the valley, the enemy forces have begun their own movement, coming forward to meet your advance. They too maintain formation, their discipline evident in the straight lines, the consistent spacing, the coordinated pace of their approach. These are not untrained conscripts, not hastily assembled defenders, but professional warriors, samurai like yourself, bound by the same codes, equipped with the same armor, trained in the same techniques. The coming engagement will be a contest between equals, a test of marginal advantages rather than overwhelming superiority. As you descend further into the valley, your field of vision becomes increasingly restricted. The confines of your helmet limit your awareness to what lies directly ahead, forcing you to rely on peripheral senses, on the movement of warriors beside you, on sound and intuition to maintain your place in the formation. It is like moving through the world with blinders, seeing only fragments of a larger picture that must be assembled through inference, through experience, through trust in the structure of which you are a part. The valley floor is closer now, the gradient becoming less severe, allowing for increased speed. The formation adjusts its pace accordingly, horses moving from careful steps to a controlled trot. The increased speed amplifies the effects of your armor's weight, the impact of each hoof fall sending waves of pressure through your body, causing the plates to shift against one another, creating new patterns of discomfort to be endured, to be pushed aside in favor of focus on the approaching enemy. Sound carries clearly in the morning air, bringing with it the first indications of the enemy's response to your advance. Orders called out, the creak and jingle of armor and movement, the rhythmic impact of hundreds of hooves on hard ground, all reach you with surprising clarity, despite the filtering effect of your helmet. These sounds form a backdrop to your own movement, a counterpoint to the similar noises generated by your own forces, creating a strange harmony of impending violence. The first arrows arc through the morning sky, launched by the enemy's forward bowmen, testing range and wind conditions, rather than expecting to inflict significant damage at this distance. You watch them rise and fall, their trajectories clearly visible against the blue sky, their impact raising small puffs of dust from the valley floor well ahead of your formation. Range finding, not attack, but a clear indication that the space for maneuvering, for adjustment, for reconsideration is rapidly diminishing. Your formation continues its advance, maintaining pace and structure despite the implied threat of those ranging arrows. Discipline holds, each warrior keeping his place in the line, no one breaking forward in individual response, no one hanging back in apprehension. It is this collective adherence to order that distinguishes the samurai from lesser warriors. This willingness to subsume individual impulse to coordinated purpose. The valley floor levels out, the terrain opening into a relatively flat expanse, dotted with scattered rocks, patches of taller grass, the occasional stunted tree. This is where the main engagement will take place, where the carefully maintained formations will eventually dissolve into the chaos of individual combat, where the outcome will be determined not by strategy alone, but by the accumulated result of hundreds of personal contests, each one a potential pivot point in the larger conflict. More arrows now, closer, some finding marks among the forward elements of your formation. You hear the distinctive sound of arrowheads striking armor, a sharp ping followed by the duller thud of impact. Occasionally, a cry of pain indicates a successful penetration, an arrow finding the gap between plates, the vulnerable joint or opening that exists in even the most carefully constructed protection. These casualties are few at this stage, more the result of unfortunate chance than deliberate targeting. The real exchange of missile fire is yet to come. Your own archers have begun to respond, sending volleys toward the advancing enemy line. From your position in the flanking element, you can see the arrows rise in near unison, their flight briefly synchronized before wind and subtle differences in release cause them to separate, to follow individual paths toward their targets. Some find their marks, causing momentary disruptions in the enemy formation as warriors fall or horses shy away from the sudden violence. But the line reforms quickly, discipline reasserting itself, the advance continuing with barely a pause. The distance between the forces continues to decrease. Details of the enemy become more visible. The specific designs of helmets, the colors of armor lacings, the banners and standards that identify particular units or commanders. Through your helmet's narrow opening, you can now see individual faces among the opposing force, or rather, the masks that cover those faces, each one projecting an expression of frozen ferocity, a manufactured intimidation that mirrors the appearance you yourself present to them. The pace of arrow exchange increases, volleys flying in both directions, creating momentary patterns of shadow and light as they pass between the forces. Casualties mount on both sides, warriors falling from their mounts, horses stumbling as wounds affect their movement. But still the formations hold, still the advance continues, the diminishing distance making each volley more effective, more deadly. Your commander signals a change in formation. The flanking units, including yours, begin to angle outward, preparing to execute the envelopment strategy discussed in the pre-battle briefing. The maneuver requires precise coordination, each warrior maintaining proper spacing while adjusting direction, keeping pace with adjacent units while responding to the changing terrain. You perform your part automatically, guiding your horse with subtle pressure of knees and reins, maintaining awareness of your position relative to others through brief glimpses caught at the edges of your helmet's opening. The enemy responds to this maneuver, adjusting their own formation to counter the potential flanking action. Their line extends, thins slightly to cover the wider frontage, a calculated risk that trades density for breadth. It is an expected response, one that your commanders have anticipated, have planned to exploit. The battle unfolds according to pattern, according to the principles of engagement that have governed warfare for generations. There is comfort in this predictability, this adherence to established form, even as it leads inevitably toward violence, toward death. The distance has closed enough now that individual missile fire has replaced coordinated volleys. Archers on both sides select specific targets, aim with greater precision, release with deliberate timing rather than in response to command. This transition marks an escalation in the lethality of the exchange, the shift from probability to intention, from statistical effect to personal selection. Your armor becomes more than symbolic protection now, its practical function assuming primacy over its representational value. An arrow strikes your shoulder guard, glancing off the curved surface with a sound like a struck bell. The impact travels through the armor into your body, a sharp vibration quickly dampened by the layers of padding and cloth that separate metal from flesh. No damage done, no penetration, but a reminder of vulnerability, of the thin margin between protection and failure. You note the direction from which the arrow came. Identify the archer who launched it, a warrior in red-laced armor, positioned slightly ahead of the main enemy line. You mark him in your mind, a potential target when the forces finally meet. The order comes to increase pace, to move from trot to canter, accelerating the closure between the opposing forces. The change in rhythm creates new patterns of pressure and movement within your armor, the faster impact of hooves, sending sharper shocks up through your body, requiring constant adjustment to maintain balance, to prevent the plates from binding or shifting out of alignment. The loosened cord from yesterday becomes more problematic now, allowing greater movement between the sections it connects, creating a potentially dangerous gap in your protection. There is no time to address this defect. The lines are closing rapidly, the space between them diminishing with each passing moment. Archers on both sides fire with increased urgency, knowing that the window for missile engagement is closing, that soon the battle will transition to direct contact, to sword and spear rather than bow and arrow. The air becomes thick with projectiles, crisscrossing between the advancing forces, finding marks with greater frequency as the target area expands, as the opportunity for evasion contracts. Another arrow strikes your armor, this one hitting the chest plate directly, the impact harder, more substantial than the glancing blow to your shoulder. The arrow fails to penetrate, but the force is enough to momentarily disrupt your breathing, to create a sharp focus of pressure at the point of impact. You absorb this, compensate for it, maintain your position and pace without visible reaction. To falter now, to show any acknowledgement of the hit, would be to grant victory to the unseen archer, to admit the effect of their attack. Pride prevents this concession, drives you forward, despite the spreading ache where metal transferred its energy to flesh. The command to draw swords ripples through your unit. You reach for your katana, drawing it with practiced efficiency, despite the encumbrance of your armored glove, the restriction of your shoulder plates. The blade comes free, with a metallic hiss, catches the morning light along its polished length, becomes an extension of your armored self, another layer in the constructed identity of the warrior. Around you, other samurai perform the same action, a coordinated unsheathing that signals the imminent transition to close combat. The enemy line is clearly visible now, individual warriors distinguishable, their armor, their weapons, their mounts all subject to assessment, to the rapid calculation of threat and opportunity that precedes direct engagement. Through your helmet's opening, you focus on the section of their line that will intersect with your unit's advance, identifying potential first opponents, noting positions of apparent strength or weakness. This analysis happens automatically, the product of training and experience that allows for tactical assessment even as your body continues its forward momentum, even as your armor shifts and binds with each motion of your horse. The distance closes to 50 yards, 40, 30. The pace increases again, horses moving to gallop, the final acceleration that will bring the lines together with maximum impact. The sensation of speed is heightened by the restriction of your vision, the narrow field creating a tunneling effect that draws the enemy toward you with seemingly increasing velocity. Your armor becomes almost impossibly heavy now, the combined effect of its weight and the acceleration of your mount, creating a pressure that threatens to unseat you, that requires constant correction, constant redistribution of balance. 20 yards. The enemy is close enough now that you can see details of their armor, can make out the decorations on helmets, the patterns of lacings, the specific shapes of sword guards. Individual identity remains obscured by masks and helmets, but posture, preparation, the set of shoulders, and the angle of weapon all communicate intention, readiness, the specific threat presented by each approaching warrior. 10 yards. Time seems to slow, perception heightening, details becoming preternaturally clear, despite the limitations of your helmet's narrow opening. You select your target, a warrior slightly to your right, his armor laced in blue and white, his sword held at an angle that suggests a diagonal strike. As the lines meet, you adjust your own position accordingly, shifting your weight, angling your mount slightly, preparing to meet his attack with one of your own, to convert the energy of your charge into the destructive power of your blade. Impact. The lines meet with a sound unlike any other, the crash of armor against armor, the sharp ring of blade on blade, the deeper thud of bodies colliding, the startled whinnies of horses forced into contact. The ordered formations dissolve instantly, the carefully maintained structure giving way to a chaos of individual engagements, each warrior finding himself suddenly isolated within a private universe of immediate threat, immediate response, the larger context of the battle momentarily lost in the desperate focus on survival. Your sword meets your chosen opponent's with a shock that travels up your arm, that reverberates through your armor. The force of the collision nearly unseats you, but training takes over, muscle memory compensating for the impact, maintaining your position through the critical moment of initial contact. Your blade slides along his, the angles of engagement shifting as both horses move past one another, as both warriors turn to maintain the connection, to follow through on the opening exchange. And now the true limitation of your armor becomes apparent. Your vision, restricted to what lies directly ahead, cannot track your opponent as he moves to your side. You must turn your entire body, must rotate at the waist within the confines of your chest plate, must reorient yourself based on limited sensory input, on the brief glimpse caught as he passed from your field of view, on the sound of his movement now behind you. This turning is slow, cumbersome, the weight of your armor fighting against the urgency of the moment, creating a dangerous lag between perception and response. You complete the turn just as your opponent reappears at the edge of your vision, his sword already in motion toward a gap between your shoulder plate and helmet. You raise your blade to parry, the movement hampered by the weight of your arm guard, by the restriction of your chest plate. The defense is successful but barely, your sword intercepting his with minimal margin, the impact sending another shockwave through your already taxed muscles. The exchange continues. Strike, counterstrike, parry, riposte, the familiar language of combat, spoken through the medium of blade and body. But every movement is compromised by the armor that protects you, every action delayed by the weight that shields you, every perception limited by the helmet that covers you. You fight not only your opponent, but your own protection, must overcome not only his skill, but the restrictions of your equipment. Surround you. Similar struggles unfold, the battlefield dissolving into dozens, hundreds of individual contests, each one a self-contained drama of attack and defense, of skill and luck, of strength and endurance. Through the narrow opening of your helmet, you catch fragments of these other engagements, a sword rising and falling, a warrior toppling from his mount, a horse rearing in panic or pain. But these glimpses are disconnected, lacking context, providing no coherent picture of the battle's progress, the larger flow of advantage or disadvantage. Your attention returns to your immediate opponent as he presses another attack, his blade seeking the same gap between shoulder and helmet, testing your defense for weakness, for the slightest hesitation or misjudgment. You parry again, the movement more fluid now, as your body adapts to the rhythm of engagement, as muscle memory overrides the encumbrance of armor. But the effort costs you, each movement drawing from a reservoir of strength already depleted by hours of weight-bearing, by the constant work of compensating for restriction. The loosened cord in your chest armor becomes a more acute problem now, the gap it creates widening slightly with each movement, exposing a potential vulnerability that your opponent has not yet noticed, but that you feel with each twist of your torso, each raising of your arm. It is a distraction, a focus of concern that divides your attention, that introduces uncertainty into movements that should be automatic, confident, unhesitating. Your opponent presses his advantage, perhaps sensing your divided attention, your compromised mobility. His attacks come faster, with greater commitment, forcing you into a defensive posture, limiting your opportunities to counter, to seize initiative. Through the narrow opening of your helmet, you see only his weapon, his armored form, the immediate threat that must be addressed. The wider context of the battle remains inaccessible, unknown, a separate reality that cannot influence your current desperate focus. A new sound enters your awareness, whistling through air, followed by impact. Arrows again, but from an unexpected direction, striking warriors on both sides without discrimination. A third force has entered the conflict, exploiting the engaged attention of the two original armies. Through your helmet's opening, you catch a glimpse of movement on a ridge to the north, mounted archers, their identity unclear, their intention evidently opportunistic. This new threat creates confusion, disruption, a recalculation of allegiance and priority. Some warriors break off their individual contests, seek to regroup, to form a defense against this new attack. Others continue their engagements, committed to the immediate struggle, unwilling or unable to disengage. The battlefield, already chaotic, becomes more so, the clear lines of conflict blurring, the purpose of each action becoming less certain. Your own opponent hesitates, his attention drawn momentarily to the new threat, his awareness divided between the immediate contest and the larger danger. You exploit this hesitation, pressing forward with a series of strikes that force him to refocus, to commit fully to the engagement or risk immediate defeat. He chooses the former, meeting your attack with renewed intensity, the momentary advantage lost as quickly as it appeared. The exchange continues, blade against blade, skill against skill, endurance against endurance. But now there is a new element, arrows falling unpredictably, creating random danger that must be managed alongside the specific threat of your opponent. You become aware of impacts against your back, your helmet, your leg guards, most glancing off without penetration, but each one a reminder of vulnerability, of the incomplete protection offered by even the most carefully crafted armor. Your vision, already severely restricted by your helmet, becomes further compromised as sweat pours into your eyes, as dust raised by the combat creates a haze that filters the light, as the constant movement and impact cause your head to shift within the confines of your headgear. You fight increasingly by feel, by instinct, by the accumulated knowledge of countless practice sessions, countless previous engagements. The sword becomes less a weapon than a probe, an instrument of perception that extends your awareness beyond the limitations of sight. The pace of combat slows slightly as fatigue begins to affect both you and your opponent. The initial burst of energy, the adrenaline-fueled intensity of first engagement, gives way to a more measured exchange, each warrior conserving strength, seeking efficiency rather than overwhelming power. Your armor, already a burden, becomes more so as muscles tire, as reserves of strength diminish. Each movement requires greater effort. Each defense demands more conscious control. Around you, the battle continues, its character changing as the initial shock of engagement transitions to the grinding attrition of sustained combat. Through the fragmentary glimpses afforded by your helmet's opening, you sense rather than see this change, fewer rapid movements, more deliberate positioning, the desperate intensity of first contact replaced by the calculated endurance of protracted conflict. The soundscape shifts accordingly, the sharp clarity of blade on blade, partially overlaid by the deeper, more constant undertone of labored breathing, of effort sustained beyond normal capacity. Your opponent's attacks become more measured, more precisely targeted. He has identified the weakness in your armor, the gap created by the loosened cord, and now focuses his efforts on exploiting this vulnerability. Each strike comes closer to penetration. Each defense requires more exact timing, more perfect positioning. The margin for error shrinks with each exchange. The consequence of failure becomes more certain. An arrow strikes your helmet, a glancing blow that nonetheless sends a sharp vibration through your skull, momentarily disorienting you, creating a brief opening in your defense. Your opponent recognizes the opportunity, presses forward, with a thrust aimed directly at the gap in your chest armor. You recover just in time, deflecting the blade with a movement that lacks your usual precision, but that succeeds in preventing penetration. The near miss sharpens your focus, clears the momentary disorientation, returns you to the immediate urgency of survival. The battle has been raging for what feels like hours, but might be mere minutes. Time loses meaning in the intense focus of combat, in the reduction of awareness to immediate threat and response. Through the filtered sound that reaches you within your helmet, you become aware of signals being sounded, of commands being called out, of some larger coordination being attempted amid the chaos of individual engagements. But these communications are incomplete, their meaning obscured by distance, by the competing noise of combat, by the limitations of your sensory perception within your armored shell. Your opponent seems to respond to these signals, his attacks becoming more cautious, more defensive in nature, suggesting a shift in tactical priority. You press your own attack, sensing an opportunity in this change, seeking to capitalize on his divided attention. The exchange continues, but the character has altered, your aggression now met with controlled withdrawal, with defensive counters, rather than direct engagement. Gradually, you become aware of a larger movement around you, a flow of warriors in a specific direction, a reforming of units that had dissolved in the initial clash. Through fragments of shouted commands, through the patterns of movement visible within your limited field of vision, you begin to understand a withdrawal has been ordered, a strategic repositioning, rather than a continuation of the current engaged combat. Your opponent is responding to this command, is seeking disengagement rather than victory, is prioritizing unit cohesion over individual contest. You allow this disengagement, recognizing the larger tactical situation, understanding that the individual battle is subordinate to the collective strategy. Your opponent backs away, maintaining a defensive posture, but clearly intent on creating distance, on rejoining his unit as it reforms. You maintain your position, your own attention now divided between the immediate situation and the effort to locate your own unit, to determine the appropriate response to the changing battlefield dynamics. Through your helmet's opening, you scan for familiar banners, for identifiable commanders, for any indication of where you should direct your next actions. The battlefield is a confusion of movement, of armored figures shifting position, of units reorganizing amid the continuing fall of arrows from the Third Force, still positioned on the northern ridge. Your vision, limited to a narrow corridor of perception, captures only fragments of this complex scene, requires constant turning, constant reorientation to construct even a partial understanding of the situation. A familiar banner appears at the edge of your visual field, the standard of your own unit, being raised as a rally point. You turn toward it, guiding your horse through the scattered combatants, the broken ground, navigating by that fixed point of reference in the shifting chaos of the battlefield. Other warriors from your unit are doing the same. Convergence on a common position, restoration of the formation that dissolved in the initial engagement. As you move, you maintain awareness of potential threats, warriors from the opposing force who might intercept you, archers from the third faction whose missiles continue to fall across the battlefield. Your armor, while restrictive, provides essential protection during this vulnerable movement, deflecting the occasional arrow, presenting a hardened exterior to any who might seek opportunistic engagement. The weight that has been your constant adversary throughout this ordeal becomes, in this moment, your most valuable ally. You reach the rally point. Take your position in the reforming unit. Around you, other warriors do the same. The structure of the formation gradually re-establishing itself through individual adherence to collective pattern. Commanders move among you, issuing instructions, clarifying the next phase of battle, the response to the changed tactical situation. Through the filtered sound that reaches you within your helmet, you gather the essential information: a withdrawal to higher ground, a defensive position against both the original enemy and the new threat, a regrouping before counterattack. The unit begins to move, a coordinated retirement rather than disordered retreat. You maintain your position in the formation, your attention divided between the specific requirements of movement and the broader awareness of potential threat. Through your helmet's opening, you catch glimpses of the enemy force, similarly withdrawing, similarly reorganizing, the individual contests of the initial engagement giving way to the more structured, more strategic phase of battle that will determine the ultimate outcome. As you move with your unit, you become increasingly aware of the accumulating toll of combat, of the armor's weight, of the day's exertion. Muscles tremble with fatigue, joints ache from constant pressure, breath comes in controlled but labored rhythm. The sweat-soaked clothing beneath your armor chafes with each movement, creates points of raw irritation where fabric rubs against skin. The loosened cord in your chest armor has created a band of bruising where the misaligned plates press unevenly against your torso. These discomforts, pushed aside during the intensity of combat, reassert themselves in the relative calm of ordered movement. But these sensations are shared by all, are the common experience of every warrior on the field. Through your helmet's narrow opening, you observe the same evidence of fatigue in others: slightly slumped shoulders, quickly straightened, momentary stumbles smoothly recovered, the occasionally labored adjustment of position within armor bearing the marks of combat. No one speaks of these struggles. No one acknowledges the collective suffering. It is simply the expected cost of your role, the physical manifestation of the burden you have chosen to bear. The unit reaches its designated position on higher ground, forms a defensive formation facing the dual threats of the original enemy and the opportunistic third force. From this vantage point, through the limited perspective of your helmet's opening, you can see more of the battlefield, can begin to construct a more complete understanding of the tactical situation. The enemy force has also withdrawn to a defensive position. The third faction remains on their northern ridge, continuing to launch occasional arrows, but making no move to directly engage either of the main forces. A strategic stalemate has emerged, at least temporarily. The initial clash has revealed strengths and vulnerabilities on all sides, has tested capabilities and limitations, has established a baseline of respect that makes hasty action unlikely. Commanders will reassess, will consider options, will weigh the potential costs and benefits of various courses of action, and while they deliberate, you and your fellow warriors will maintain your positions, will remain encased in your armor, will continue to bear the physical burden of potential violence. The sun has risen high now, its heat intensifying, adding another layer of discomfort to your already taxed endurance. Within your armor, temperature rises to nearly unbearable levels, sweat pouring from every surface of your body, soaking the cloth layers, pooling in the recesses of your equipment. Your vision blurs occasionally as salt stings your eyes, as fatigue affects your focus, as the cumulative effect of restricted oxygen intake begins to manifest in subtle disorientation. You blink away these effects, maintain your position, your readiness, your outward appearance of unwavering capability. Around you, other warriors do the same, each one a self-contained universe of discomfort, of effort, of disciplined endurance. Through your helmet's opening, you see only their armored exteriors, their controlled postures, their weapons held at ready. There is no visible evidence of the struggle taking place within each shell, no outward manifestation of the price being paid for this display of implacable presence. It is a collective fiction, a shared pretense that the armor is no burden, that readiness has no cost, that the warrior and his protection are a seamless, effortless unity. And as the day wears on, as the strategic situation develops, through measured adjustments of position, through occasional probing actions, through the complex calculation of advantage and risk, you remain within your armor, bearing its weight, accepting its restrictions, enduring its discomforts. You are no longer merely wearing protection. You have become the thing you bear, have merged with the burden that defines you, have surrendered individual comfort to collective purpose, personal limitation to symbolic power. This is the paradox at the heart of the warrior's path, that strength emerges from restraint, that power manifests through acceptance of burden, that identity is forged in the willing embrace of limitation. The armor that restricts you also defines you, the weight that oppresses you also elevates you, the mask that hides your humanity also proclaims your status. You have become what you bear, and what you bear has become you, an inseparable unity of symbol and substance, of protection and vulnerability, of power and constraint. The enemy you cannot see is not just the opponent obscured by distance, or the arrow launched from beyond your field of vision. It is also the invisible cost of your chosen path, the unseen toll of the weight you have accepted, the unacknowledged vulnerability that exists within the very protection you have embraced. It is the paradox made manifest, the contradiction embodied, the inevitable consequence of a life defined by the armor that both shields and imprisons you. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, the angle of light changing subtly, shadows lengthening across the battlefield. Hours have passed since the initial engagement, since the withdrawal to defensive positions, since the emergence of the tactical stalemate that has characterized the middle portion of this day. Throughout this time, you have remained in your armor, have maintained your position, have endured the accumulating discomfort with the stoicism expected of your station. The strategic situation has evolved through small adjustments, through probing actions, through the exchange of missile fire that tests defenses without committing fully to renewed engagement. Your unit has shifted positions several times, responding to perceived opportunities or threats, maintaining the defensive integrity of your force while seeking tactical advantage. Each movement has required fresh effort from already taxed muscles, has created new patterns of pressure and friction within your armor, has added another layer to the burden you have carried since before dawn. From your current position, through the narrow opening of your helmet, you can see the enemy force arrayed across a low ridge to the east. They too have been maneuvering throughout the day, adjusting their formation in response to your own movements, maintaining a carefully calculated distance that prevents decisive engagement while preserving the potential for renewed conflict. The third faction, the opportunistic force that entered the battle unexpectedly, has withdrawn from the field entirely, apparently satisfied with the disruption they caused, unwilling to commit to protracted involvement. A messenger arrives from the command position, delivers instructions to your unit leader. The information is relayed quickly. The day is ending. No decisive engagement will be sought before nightfall. The unit is to maintain defensive position through the evening, prepared for potential night action or early morning resumption of hostilities. This is not unexpected. The pattern of the battle, the late hour, the evident caution of both commanding generals, all pointed toward continuation rather than conclusion, toward the extension of this test of endurance into at least another day. The news settles through the unit, acknowledged with minimal reaction, with no visible relief or disappointment. To have expected otherwise would have been to misunderstand the nature of warfare in this era, in this culture, deliberate, measured, as concerned with demonstration as with decision. A complex conversation conducted through position and presence as much as through actual violence. The ceremonial aspects are as important as the practical, the symbolic significance as relevant as the tactical outcome. The warriors who would wish for quick resolution, for immediate result, are those who have not yet grasped the deeper purpose of these engagements. As the light fades, preparations begin for the night phase of the operation. Torches are distributed, but not yet lit, their flame reserved for specific signaling or for necessary movement after dark. Cold rations are passed through the unit, rice bowls, dried fish, the same simple sustenance that has fueled armies for centuries. Water is provided in bamboo containers, passed from hand to hand, each warrior drinking just enough to address immediate need, aware that supply is limited, that tomorrow's requirements must be considered alongside present thirst. Eating and drinking require temporary lifting of your face mask, a brief unveiling that you perform with practiced efficiency, with minimal exposure. The act provides momentary relief from the constant pressure, the restricted breathing, the trapped heat that has been your companion throughout the day. But this relief is fleeting, the mask lowered again as soon as sustenance has been consumed, the barrier between yourself and the world re-established, the warrior persona reaffirmed through the resumption of concealment. Darkness gathers in the valleys first, then climbs the slopes, eventually enveloping the entire battlefield in its concealing embrace. The visual limitations imposed by your helmet become more pronounced in this diminished light, your already restricted field of view further compromised by the absence of clear illumination. You rely increasingly on other senses, on hearing filtered through layers of helmet and mask, on the feel of your horse beneath you, on the subtle cues of movement and position conveyed by the warriors stationed to either side. Night operations require specialized awareness, a different quality of attention than daylight engagement. The darkness emphasizes sound, magnifies its significance, while obscuring its source. Through your helmet, you listen for anomalies, for patterns that suggest movement beyond your visual field, for the subtle indications of potential threat that might emerge from the surrounding blackness. This auditory vigilance adds another layer of demand to your already taxed resources, requires sustained concentration, despite mounting fatigue, despite the relentless discomfort of your armored enclosure. The unit adjusts its disposition for night defense, spacing increased slightly to expand coverage, rotation systems established to allow minimal rest, while maintaining overall vigilance, communication protocols clarified to address the additional challenges of darkness. You take your assigned position, understanding your responsibilities, the specific sector you are to monitor, the signals that would indicate need for response or reformation. The collective security depends on individual adherence to these protocols, on each warrior fulfilling his designated role despite personal discomfort, despite the increasing burden of sustained armor bearing. As full darkness settles over the battlefield, as the stars emerge in brilliant profusion overhead, you maintain your vigilance, your readiness, your outward appearance of unwavering capability. But within your armored shell, the accumulated cost of the day makes itself known with increasing insistence. Every muscle aches from sustained tension, from hours of supporting the weight of protection, from the constant small adjustments required to maintain balance, position, functional capacity. Joints throb where armor has pressed against them, where movement has created points of friction beyond the capacity of padding to mitigate. The loosened cord in your chest plate has allowed uneven distribution of weight throughout the day, creating a band of acute discomfort where metal has pressed directly against the underpadding, compressing it to inadequate thinness. Your breath comes in measured cycles, controlled but increasingly labored, the combined restriction of chest plate and face mask, limiting oxygen intake, requiring greater effort to maintain adequate supply to taxed muscles, to a brain operating on minimal rest, to a body functioning at the outer limits of its endurance. The thermal environment within your armor has become its own form of torment, heat generated by your exertion, trapped by the multiple layers, creating a microclimate of oppressive warmth that offers no relief, no respite, no moment of cooling comfort. The cloth components of your underpadding, soaked with sweat throughout the day, now cling to your skin in cold, clammy embrace, as the night air causes their temperature to drop. This creates an uncomfortable paradox, overheating at your core while experiencing chill at your extremities, neither condition allowing for true comfort, both demanding adaptation, acceptance, the disciplined setting aside of physical complaint in service to continued function. Sleep is impossible in full armor, mounted or standing in formation. At best, warriors in your situation might achieve brief periods of reduced alertness, momentary descents into semi-consciousness, quickly interrupted by the discomfort of position, by the vigilance required by your role, by the ingrained awareness of potential threat that never fully subsides. Rest in any meaningful sense is denied until armor can be removed, until the burden can be set aside, until the warrior can temporarily shed the physical manifestation of his role. That release lies far in the future, beyond the night's vigil, beyond tomorrow's potential renewal of conflict, beyond the eventual restoration of your force to home territory, to secure encampment. Hours pass in this state of enforced wakefulness, of ongoing discomfort, of sustained vigilance, despite mounting fatigue. The darkness is absolute now, broken only by the distant fires of the enemy encampment, by the occasional movement of torches marking messenger traffic between positions, by the brilliant coldness of stars wheeling slowly overhead. Time loses meaning, becomes measured, not by conventional units, but by the rhythm of pain, the cycle of acute discomfort, rising to conscious awareness, being acknowledged, then deliberately set aside, only to return again with the next shift of position, the next unavoidable movement within your restrictive shell. Periodically, commanders move through the position, checking readiness, confirming awareness, ensuring the defensive integrity of the formation. Their presence is announced by soft footfalls, by the subtle sound of armor and controlled movement, by quiet exchanges with unit leaders. These visits serve practical purpose, verification of defensive preparation, but also symbolic function, demonstration that the burden of vigilance is shared, that commanders participate in the discomfort they require of their warriors. It is a small thing, but significant in the culture of warfare that defines your world, the culture that values demonstrated commitment over declared intention, shared experience over isolated command. The night deepens, the temperature drops further. Your body responds to both the cold and the ongoing restriction with increasing protest, muscles cramping briefly before forcible relaxation, joints stiffening to painful rigidity when held too long in one position, skin chafing raw, where sweat-soaked fabric continues to move against it with each breath, each subtle adjustment of posture. These physical complaints grow harder to ignore as the night progresses, as reserves of endurance diminish, as the distance from your last real rest extends beyond normal capacity. But ignore them you must. Suppress them you will. Push them from the center of awareness to the periphery through disciplined focus on external threat, on tactical responsibility, on the role you have accepted, and the status you have earned through demonstrated capacity to bear such burdens without complaint, without surrender to mere physical limitation. This is the essence of the warrior's path, not the avoidance of suffering, but its acceptance, not the evasion of burden, but its deliberate assumption, not the denial of limitation, but its transcendence, through focused will, through cultivated indifference to personal comfort. Around you, other warriors maintain similar vigil, endure similar discomfort, practice similar discipline in the setting aside of physical complaint. Through the darkness, through the filtering effect of your helmet, you can discern only their outlines, their general positions, their occasional necessary movements, but you know, with absolute certainty born of shared experience, that behind each armored facade lies the same struggle you yourself engage, the battle against fatigue, against pain, against the body's insistent demand for relief from the conditions imposed upon it. It is a private contest fought in parallel by each warrior, a solitary battle conducted in the company of others equally engaged, equally committed, equally silent in their individual suffering. Midnight comes and passes, marked by rotation of the guard, by redistribution of vigilance responsibilities, by subtle reorganization of the defensive formation. You move to your new position, each step an exercise in controlled discomfort, in the management of armor that seems to have grown heavier, more restrictive as the night has progressed. Your awareness has narrowed, focused on essential function, on necessary observation, on the minimum requirements of your role. There is no capacity for extraneous thought, for consideration beyond immediate circumstance, for engagement with anything beyond the present moment and its specific demands. The deepest part of the night settles over the battlefield, the hours when human capacity is at its lowest ebb, when the body's natural rhythms pull most insistently toward rest, towards surrender to unconsciousness. This is the time of greatest vulnerability, of most significant challenge to sustained vigilance. Commanders recognize this window of increased risk, adjust protocols accordingly, more frequent checks, rotation of observation points, small but deliberate movements to combat the seduction of stillness, the dangerous drift toward diminished awareness. You fight your own battle against this insidious threat, employing techniques learned through years of nighttime vigils, of guard duties, of protracted campaigns that required sustained wakefulness beyond normal limits. You focus on specific points within your assigned observation sector, shift your attention deliberately from one to another, create a rhythm of vigilance that keeps your mind engaged, that resists the gravitational pull of fatigue. You adjust your position slightly, periodically, introducing new patterns of discomfort that override the dangerous adaptation to existing ones, that provide fresh stimulus to a nervous system increasingly desperate for the release of unconsciousness. And through it all, the armor remains, your protection, your prison, your identity, your burden. It has long since ceased to be separate from yourself, has become instead an extension of your presence, a manifestation of your commitment, a physical embodiment of the role that defines your existence. The weight that oppresses you also elevates you. The restriction that confines you also distinguishes you. The mask that conceals you also proclaims you. You are the armor, and the armor is you, an inseparable unity, forged through adversity, through endurance, through the willing acceptance of burden as the price of significance. The night begins to soften, the absolute blackness, giving way to the first suggestion of gray at the eastern edge of the sky. Dawn approaches, not yet arrived, but announcing its eventual emergence through the subtle lightening of the void, the gradual increase in visibility across the battlefield. With this changing light comes renewed awareness of the strategic situation, of the disposition of forces, of the potential for resumption of active hostilities with the full arrival of day. Preparations begin, quiet but purposeful, for the transition from night defense to day operations. Warriors check weapons, adjust armor fastenings that have shifted during the night, assess themselves and their equipment for any issues that must be addressed before potential engagement. Commanders move through the positions, confirming readiness, clarifying plans, ensuring that the force is prepared for whatever the new day might bring. You perform your own preparations methodically, working through the accumulated stiffness of the night, the reluctance of cold muscles to respond with their usual efficiency, the protest of joints held too long in one position. The armor feels impossibly heavy now, as though it has been absorbing the Earth's gravity throughout the night, increasing its mass with each passing hour. Every movement requires conscious effort, deliberate application of will to overcome the resistance of both equipment and body, to maintain the appearance of ready capability despite the reality of depleted resources. The gray light strengthens, details emerging from darkness, the landscape revealing itself in stages of increasing clarity. Through your helmet's opening, you can now make out the enemy position across the valley, can see movement, suggesting similar preparation, similar readiness for potential resumption of conflict. The familiar rhythm of warfare reasserts itself. Observation, assessment, adjustment, the complex dance of position and presence that constitutes the actual conduct of battle in this era, in this culture. Light strengthens further, color returning to a world that has been rendered in monochrome by darkness, depth perception improving, as shadows regain their definition, their relationship to the objects that cast them. The battlefield expands visually, reveals its full extent, its topographical features, its strategic implications. Command decisions will be made based on this renewed clarity, on the fresh assessment of advantage and vulnerability that daylight permits, on the calculated balance of risk and potential gain that governs military action. A messenger arrives from the command position, confers briefly with your unit leader. Information passes through the chain of command, reaches you in condensed form. The enemy is withdrawing, moving east toward their own territory, apparently unwilling to commit to renewed engagement under current conditions. Your force will not pursue immediately, will instead secure the battlefield, will consolidate position before determining next actions. The immediate threat of combat has passed, at least temporarily, replaced by the more measured activities of tactical reorganization, of strategic reassessment. This news brings no visible reaction, no demonstrated relief, no outward acknowledgement of the reprieve it represents. Such display would be unseemly, would suggest an inappropriate concern with personal safety, with individual comfort rather than collective purpose. But within your armored shell, within the private universe of your physical experience, there is a subtle shift, not relaxation, not surrender to fatigue, but a small recalibration of endurance expectations, a minute adjustment to the projected duration of your current burdened state. The day that seemed endless now reveals a potential conclusion, not immediate, but at least conceivable, at least existing, as a point on the horizon of your awareness. The sun breaks the horizon, sending long rays across the valley, illuminating the evidence of yesterday's engagement. Disturbed earth, where horses have churned the ground, scattered equipment, abandoned in the chaos of combat, darker patches suggesting blood soaked into soil, and there, visible now in the clear morning light, the fallen warriors from both sides who did not survive the initial clash, whose armor became not protection, but coffin, whose burden has been permanently lifted through the ultimate cost. They lie as they fell, their equipment still encasing bodies now cooling, now becoming merely the vacant shells of what were once men like yourself, bearing the same weight, enduring the same restrictions, ultimately surrendering to the final limitation. You observe these fallen through the narrow opening of your helmet, your vision focusing briefly on each one before moving to the next, acknowledging their presence, their sacrifice, their final release from the burden you continue to bear. There is no evident emotion in this observation, no visible reaction to the sight of what might easily have been, might still become, your own fate. The warrior's discipline requires acceptance of mortality without dwelling upon it, acknowledgement of risk without surrender to fear, recognition of eventual ending without allowing that awareness to compromise present function. The unit begins to move, pulling back from the forward defensive position, consolidating with other elements of your force, preparing for the next phase of operations. You take your place in the formation, guiding your horse with the same deliberate control you have maintained throughout, presenting the same outward appearance of unwavering capability, despite the reality of near exhaustion, of accumulated pain, of depleted resources that fuel your continued function. The armor remains as heavy as ever, the restrictions as limiting, the discomfort as acute, but these conditions have become normalized, through sustained exposure, have been integrated into your baseline experience, have ceased to register as extraordinary, and become merely the expected context of your existence. The movement continues, the formation taking shape as individual units find their designated positions, as the army transforms from disconnected elements into coordinated whole. Through your helmet's opening, you observe this process, this demonstration of collective discipline, of shared purpose, manifested through individual adherence to established protocol. Despite fatigue, despite discomfort, despite the toll of sustained vigilance, each warrior performs his function, maintains his place, contributes to the integrity of the formation that is the physical embodiment of your force's continued viability, continued threat, continued purpose. Word passes through the ranks, return to encampment, secure position, prepare for potential further operations, pending diplomatic developments, pending strategic reassessment. The immediate conflict has reached a point of temporary suspension, not through decisive outcome, but through mutual recognition of cost, of risk, of the ambiguous advantage any continuation might secure. It is a characteristic conclusion to the type of warfare practiced in this era, in this culture, symbolic as much as substantive, focused on demonstration rather than annihilation, on the establishment of relative position rather than absolute victory. The formation begins its movement away from the battlefield, a controlled, deliberate withdrawal that preserves dignity, that maintains structural integrity, that presents an image of undiminished capability, despite the reality of exhaustion, of depletion, of the accumulated cost, of sustained armor-bearing, of protracted readiness. You take your place in this procession, your awareness divided between the specific requirements of movement and the broader context of your experience, between the immediate demands of function and the deeper significance of your participation in this ancient, formalized approach to collective violence. The journey back to encampment will take hours, will extend your time in armor well beyond the already excessive duration you have endured. The weight will not diminish, the restriction will not ease, the discomfort will not subside. If anything, these burdens will increase as resources continue to deplete, as muscles pass beyond fatigue into the realm of microscopic damage, as joints suffer the cumulative effect of compression, of limitation, of sustained abnormal loading. The armor that has defined your experience, that has both protected and constrained you throughout this ordeal, will continue to exact its price until the moment it is finally removed, until the warrior and the tool of his trade are at last separated, distinct, individually acknowledged, rather than functionally fused. As the formation moves away from the battlefield, as the sight of potential death recedes behind you, your thoughts turn for the first time toward that eventual moment of release, of unburdening, of return to merely human existence, without the weight, without the restriction, without the identity conferred by your protected state. It is not an imminent prospect. Hours of continued bearing remain before you, but it exists now as a point on the horizon, as a conceivable conclusion to what it seemed an endless trial, an infinite extension of discomfort, of limitation, of the paradoxical unity of protection and burden. The sun climbs higher, renewing its assault of heat, of thermal challenge within your enclosed environment. Sweat begins again, its constant flow, its saturating presence between skin and fabric, its accumulation in the recesses of your equipment. Thirst returns with heightened intensity, your body desperately seeking replacement for fluid lost through heat, through exertion, through the sustained effort of bearing your protection, through a full day, a full night, and now the beginning of another day. Water is distributed sparingly, conservation still necessary, despite the reduced tactical threat, the immediate physical need subordinated to the longer-term requirements of the force as a whole. The formation continues its deliberate progress away from the battlefield, each step carrying you closer to eventual release, to the distant prospect of unburdening. But even this anticipation is disciplined, controlled, subordinated to the immediate requirements of function, of presence, of the outward manifestation of undiminished capability. There will be no premature celebration, no visible acknowledgement of relief, no demonstrated awareness of personal comfort, until the collective purpose has been fully served, until the ceremonial aspects of warfare have been honored as completely as the practical, until the symbolic significance of your armored state has been leveraged to its maximum effect. Hours pass in this state of disciplined anticipation, of controlled focus on immediate function, despite awareness of eventual release. The formation maintains its integrity, its deliberate pace, its outward appearance of uncompromised capability. Individual warriors continue to bear their armor, their protection, their burden, their identity, without visible complaint, without demonstrated awareness of the cost exacted by this sustained encasement. The collective fiction that the armor is no impediment, that its weight is no challenge, that its restriction is no limitation, persists through mutual commitment to the warrior's ideal of transcendent endurance, of indifference to mere physical discomfort. The encampment appears in the distance, a welcome sight, but one that elicits no visible reaction, no outward acknowledgement of the relief it represents. The formation maintains its pace, its structure, its ceremonial aspect, as it approaches this destination, as it nears the point where private experience might finally align with public presentation, where the burden so long endured might finally be set aside, where the warrior might temporarily separate from the physical manifestation of his role and return to merely human existence. Entry into the encampment is itself a ceremonial process, a deliberately structured transition from the realm of potential combat to the domain of secured recovery. Units enter in specified sequence, take up designated positions, establish the defensive perimeter that will protect the force during its period of rest, of reorganization, of preparation for future operations. Your unit finds its assigned place, forms its portion of this collective shield, completes its contribution to the security that will permit greater freedom within the core of the encampment. Only when this process is complete, when the integrity of the collective has been ensured, does attention turn to individual needs, to the particular requirements of warriors who have borne their armor, their identity, their burden for far longer than design or tradition or human capacity would ordinarily permit. Even then, the unburdening follows protocol, adheres to established sequence, honors the hierarchies that structure every aspect of warfare in this era, in this culture. When your turn comes, when protocol finally permits your release from the weight you have carried for so long, the process is as deliberate, as ceremonial, as structured as the donning was at the beginning of this ordeal. Servants approach, begin the careful removal of components in reverse order of their application. Each piece is treated with respect, with appropriate acknowledgement of its significance, with proper handling befitting an object that is simultaneously practical tool and symbolic emblem. The face mask is removed first, lifted away from your features, breaking the seal that has separated your expression from the world, that has hidden your humanity behind manufactured ferocity, that has protected your individual identity while projecting your categorical significance. The rush of unrestricted air against your skin is startling in its intensity, in the sensory overload it represents after so long behind barrier, behind filter, behind the controlled limitation of your armored state. The helmet follows, lifted from your head with careful hands, relieving the pressure that has been your constant companion, the weight that has compressed your neck, that has restricted your vision, that has filtered your perception of the world to the narrow corridor permitted by its opening. The sudden expansion of visual field is disorienting, the peripheral awareness long suppressed, now flooding back with excessive information, with details so abundant it momentarily overwhelms your capacity to process, to integrate, to respond appropriately. Component by component, the armor is removed, each piece lifting away a segment of weight, of restriction, of the identity you have carried throughout this ordeal. The shoulder guards, the chest plate, the arm protectors, the leg coverings, each one separated from your body, transferred to waiting hands, removed to appropriate storage where it will be cleaned, maintained, prepared for the next occasion of use, the next transformation of man into warrior, of individual into symbol, of mere mortality into ceremonial significance. As the armor comes away, as its weight is lifted piece by piece, your body responds with complex sensations, relief at the removal of pressure, discomfort as compressed tissues expand, pain as circulation returns to areas long restricted, weakness as muscles, suddenly relieved of load, demonstrate the extent of their fatigue, their depletion, their microscopic damage. You stand straighter with each piece removed, breathe more fully, move with gradually increasing freedom. But these improved physical conditions come at the cost of vulnerability, of exposure, of the separation from the protection, the identity, the significance your armor has provided. When the last piece has been removed, when you stand in only the sweat-soaked cloth layers that have been your interface with the armor, you experience a moment of profound transition from armored to unarmored, from symbolic to individual, from ceremonial to merely human. It is a complex emotional experience, one that contains elements of relief and loss, of liberation and vulnerability, of return to self and separation from purpose. But these emotions remain private, unexpressed, acknowledged only within the confines of your own awareness, never manifested in way that might suggest inappropriate attachment to comfort, to ease, to the absence of the burden that defines your role. The servants withdraw with your armor, carrying it to the area where it will receive appropriate attention, where it will be prepared for its next use, its next union with your body, its next transformation of individual into emblem. You are left alone with the physical aftermath of your prolonged encasement, the fatigue that makes even simple movement an exercise in deliberate control, the soreness that marks every point where armor has pressed against flesh, the raw areas where sweat-soaked fabric has rubbed skin to painful sensitivity, the lingering disorientation of sensory expansion after prolonged restriction. You move carefully toward the bathing area, each step a negotiation with exhaustion, with the body's insistent demand for rest, for recovery, for the suspension of further effort, until resources have been restored, until damage has been repaired, until normal function has been re-established. Other warriors move similarly, each one caught in his own private aftermath, his own personal accounting of the cost exacted by prolonged armor-bearing. There is no discussion of this shared experience, no verbal acknowledgement of the ordeal just endured. It is simply the expected condition of your role, the anticipated consequence of your chosen path, the unremarkable outcome of fulfilling your function within the social, military, and cultural structure that defines your world. The bath, when you reach it, offers momentary physical relief, warm water easing the worst of the muscular tension, cleansing the accumulated sweat and grime of protracted encasement, providing brief suspension of gravitational pressure on joints compressed by day-long loading. But even this relief is temporary, insufficient to address the deeper depletion, the more fundamental exhaustion that has settled into your core, that will require extended rest, substantial nourishment, significant time to fully resolve. The immediate comfort of immersion is welcome, but recognized as superficial, as merely the first stage in a recovery process that will extend long after this momentary respite. After bathing comes food, simple but nourishing, provided in quantity that acknowledges the caloric deficit created by your prolonged exertion, your sustained armor-bearing, your extended vigilance. You eat methodically, without particular pleasure, focused on the functional aspect of nourishment rather than any sensory enjoyment it might provide. Your body accepts this fuel gratefully, begins the slow process of resource replenishment, of energy restoration, of the cellular reconstruction necessary after the breakdown inherent in sustained effort beyond normal limits. With basic physical needs addressed, you move to the sleeping area, to the simple mat that represents the culmination of your current desires, the fulfillment of the body's most urgent request after food and water have been supplied. The mere act of lying down, of surrendering to horizontal rest after so many hours of vertical burden-bearing, provides relief so intense it borders on pleasure, a sensation so welcome it momentarily overwhelms the continuing discomfort of overused muscles, of compressed joints, of skin rubbed raw by the inevitable friction of prolonged armor-wearing. Sleep approaches quickly, consciousness receding before the overwhelming tide of fatigue, the accumulated sleep debt of more than a full day's wakefulness, the body's insistent demand for the recovery only unconsciousness can provide. But before you surrender completely to this biological imperative, in the liminal space between waking and sleeping, a final thought surfaces that tomorrow or the next day, or at some point in the near future, the cycle will begin again. The armor will be donned once more, the weight assumed anew, the restriction accepted again, in service to role, to function, to the identity that defines your existence. It is not a thought that brings distress, not a prospect that elicits resistance. It is simply the recognition of pattern, the acknowledgement of purpose, the acceptance of the path you have chosen, the burden you have agreed to bear. The armor is not merely what you wear, it is who you are. The weight is not just what you carry, it is what carries you. The restriction is not only what limits you, it is what defines the shape of your significance in the world you inhabit. As consciousness fades, as sleep finally claims you, this understanding remains that the day has not truly ended, has merely been temporarily suspended. The armor has not been permanently removed, has only been briefly set aside. The burden has not been ultimately lifted, has just been momentarily relieved. The cycle continues. The pattern persists. The role remains, awaiting your return to its demands, to its weight, to its paradoxical unity of oppression and elevation, of limitation and significance. And in this understanding lies the final recognition that the day that never ends is not merely the specific ordeal just endured, but the larger pattern of the warrior's existence, the cyclical assumption of burden, the repeated embrace of weight, the ongoing acceptance of restriction in service to purpose, to identity, to the particular form of significance that gives meaning to the discomfort, that justifies the limitation, that transforms mere physical endurance into something approaching transcendence. Those who never took off the armor, who met their ending on the battlefield, who surrendered final breath within the confines of their protection, they found a different resolution to the paradox, a permanent release from the cycle of bearing and unburdening, a conclusion that transformed temporary identity into eternal significance. Their armor became their monument, their restriction became their liberation, their burden became their legacy. In death, they achieved what the living constantly seek through the willing acceptance of weight, of limitation, of the deliberate embrace of that which both protects and constrains, the transcendence of mere individual existence, the merging of self with symbol, the elevation of personal experience to ceremonial significance. And so, as sleep claims you fully, as consciousness yields completely to the body's demand for recovery, you carry this awareness into the darkness, that the armor awaits your return, that the weight remains to be borne again, that the day has not ended, but merely paused, that the cycle continues for as long as you draw breath, for as long as you maintain the capacity to bear the burden, to endure the restriction, to embody the paradox that defines the warrior's path in this world of formal violence, of ceremonial conflict, of symbolic death, and equally symbolic survival. The day never ends, it merely transforms, evolves, cycles between bearing and unburdening, between protection and vulnerability, between the transcendent significance of the armored state and the mere humanity of the unencumbered existence. And in this endless day, this ongoing cycle, this perpetual alternation between weighted and weightless, lies the essence of the warrior's identity, the core of his purpose, the foundation of his significance in the social, military, and cultural structure that defines his world and gives meaning to his suffering, his endurance, his willing embrace of the burden that both elevates and oppresses, that both defines and constrains, that both protects and imprisons the self it simultaneously creates and conceals.